Welcome to the Music Journal podcast, where we talk about the hottest things happening in music right now, and also how you can apply it if you're an aspiring producer or musician yourself. I'm your host, Wes Yee. I'm a producer, artist, and educator, and I'm stoked to be chatting with you. Let's make history. All right, welcome to another episode of the Music Journal podcast. Today, we have an extremely special guest. His name is Prince Charles Alexander. And if you don't know who he is, he's pretty much just an extreme wealth of knowledge. He's a producer and an audio engineer who's worked with Biggie, P. Diddy, Alicia Keys, Aretha Franklin. That's just to name a few. If you've heard of them, he's probably crossed paths with them or worked with them. And his work really speaks for itself. And I know I had to get him on the show just because he's got a ton of wisdom and life experience that I know you guys at home will appreciate. And funny story, I've actually had the incredible honor of studying hip-hop production with him myself, and I still annoy him to this day to get his critiques on tracks I'm working on and this podcast and all sorts of stuff. But for some reason, he still returns my emails, and he's here right now. So PC, thanks for being on the Music Journal, man.
Thanks, Wes. I really appreciate you reaching out to me and giving me this opportunity to speak with you and speak with your audience.
Dude, you're the man. I kind of gave a really brief synopsis of who you are and what you do. I know you've had an extremely long timeline and history of things that you've done, but if you want to just give the listeners a little bit more and kind of fill in some of those gaps.
Yeah, the brief synopsis is that I've had three careers. I started out when I got out of college at 21 trying to become an artist, and I did succeed. I did 3 albums. I was on Virgin Records, and I was a funk artist. I put my first record out in 1979, chasing Prince and Rick James. And in 1979, Rapper's Delight came out also. So hip hop was on the rise. Now, you got to really flash back to 1979. Hip hop was an anomaly. So if you were already a musician putting music out, it's not like you were just going to run and all of a sudden become a hip hop artist. So over the next 6 or 7 years, I saw hip hop continue to rise, and then funk kind of ran headlong into hip hop as a financial endeavor. In other words, record companies started to see that they could make more money with hip hop because you had to spend less on the group. There's 2 people or 3 people, whereas funk groups were like 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 people. So around 1986, I sat and thought and tried to figure out, well, how do I extend my career? And it dawned on me that I was a producer that didn't really know all the new technologies that had come in. 1980 saw the rise of the drum machine, the programmable drum machines, the TR-808 and the Lin LM1. 83 saw MIDI come in, music sequences came in, and around 85, it's like, what is all this stuff? How do I make heads and tails of it? So I went to audio engineering school in order to become a better producer. But while I was studying and interning at studios, people started to hire me to work on projects. I got an internship at a studio. My name got bigger and bigger. Then I, continued to try to tie Prince Charles as the artist together with Prince Charles, the producer engineer. One thing led to another. And over a period of years, by 1990, I ran into Jodeci. And in 1992, I ran into P. Diddy. Wow. And then for 10 years, I was with him as an engineer. And we had platinum records with, Biggie, 112. The Locks, Diddy himself, Mary J. Blige, Faith Evans, Total. I mean, the list went on and on and on and on. It was a great time, really awesome. One of the other people that was in that ensemble of engineers was Tony Maserati. Wow. And Tony's still doing it to this day. He just did Beyonce's latest album, Beyonce and Jay-Z's latest album. And for me, I had young children. Well, I had children that had gotten older, and I didn't realize I was a little bit more of a homebody than I really want to be, and so that homebodiness pushed me into trying to conceive of ways to go into my older years without having to keep making phone calls to A&R people. And that led me to thinking about moving my skill set into academia. And I started teaching at NYU's Clive Davis department, which gave us Maggie Rogers. Maggie was one of my students. There's another group called Oshun. They were some of my students. And that was Nyambi and Thiwande. And from NYU, I got a call from Berkeley to come and do a full-time stint. And man, I can't tell you how good it is to be at a place where I get to fiddle with all of the concepts and techniques that we play around with as producers and engineers without the stress of having to continually get that next hit record and continue to find that next gig, compete with this engineer, compete with that producer.
Right.
When honestly, I love everybody's work. And from the vantage point of being a professor at a world acclaimed music institution, I get to appreciate everyone's work and then spread the love and spread the knowledge.
It sounds dope. It sounds like it kind of took you back to kind of being an artist again and kind of doing it for fun, which is how it all starts in the first place, right? Just because you love making music. And to me, it's really cool to hear you fill in all the blanks. I've never heard it like that before, but it makes so much sense to me now that you ended up as a producer, having started as a funk artist, because I know that you play a bunch of instruments. I know you play the saxophone, and you just got off tour playing flute, I believe. As someone who also started off doing instruments and then kind of gravitating to hip hop later on, that makes so much sense to me. I was wondering, as you were kind of telling that story, do you feel like sales for hip hop increased also because it kind of added that lyrical element to it? Like I listened to a lot of funk, and I grew up on that stuff too, and some of it has lyrics, but I feel like the content of it and it's more groove oriented, whereas hip hop is so lyrically driven. You know what I mean? Do you think that had a big part to do with it?
Well, because I'm a musician, I never gravitated toward hip hop because of the words. I listened to the grooves, and I knew that they were getting James Brown grooves and Parliament Funkadelic grooves and things like that. I always just really looked at it as pure dollars and cents. If you're a record company, you have to do business with two people with a hip hop ensemble, and you have to do business with, a 13-piece group if it's a funk ensemble. It always just looked like it was a more cost effective. Well, actually, in retrospect, it just seemed like it was a more cost effective thing. And then when Walk This Way succeeded in 1985, Run DMC and Aerosmith, and kind of joined hip hop and rock and roll together, the handwriting was on the wall that this thing was not going to go away. Because in 1979, it's like hip hop looked like novelty. It looked like it would disappear like any minute. Like there would just be a bad hip hop record and it would go away forever.
Wow, no shit.
By 1985, it basically knocked hip hop, it knocked funk out of the box. Parliament lost their deal. Ohio Players lost their deal. Sun, Brass Construction, Zap. The Commodores. The list went on and on and on. Almost every funk artist lost their deal between 85 and 86.
Damn, I didn't know that. I didn't know that was the reason either.
And I was on Virgin Records in 85 because I signed in 83. I was still there in 85. Over the next 2 years, I just felt like, man, if I don't figure out another way to extend my career, I'm going to be out on the streets without a deal shortly. And sure enough, within about 18 months, it's really funny how I found out I didn't have a deal. When you first get a deal, you call your A&R guy, and he calls you back. And, this goes on and on for as long as you're in favor. And then what happens when your deal is starting to dissipate is the guy doesn't call you back. He calls you back 2 days later. Then he calls you back a week later. Then he calls you back 2 weeks later. Then he calls you back 2 months later.
He's ghosting you.
And then he disappears. And you're like, fuck. And then I kind of found out that I didn't have a deal because there was an artist on Virgin named Jermaine. Oh, God. I forget his last name. But he was a great singer. And he put out some tracks, and it was banging. It was really hot. And I was like, well, that doesn't sound like funk. That sounds like pop. And so pop started to get its sound together, and hip hop solidified that, look, if you want to make quick, fast money in the music business, sign some hip hop artists. And that was kind of the clarion call for Atlantic Records and Arista Records and MCA Records. And those were labels back in those days.
I think your ability to adapt is really a big part of your genius. I had a guest, his name is Adam Walder. I don't know if you know him. He started undergroundhiphop.com, and he had a retail store on Huntington Ave back in the day. Have you ever met him before, Adam Walder?
No, I met Adam, no.
Okay. Yeah, he's a cool dude, and I was thankful to have him on the show too, and he and I are really good friends now. But his forums are where people like Immortal Technique got their start. He was the first person to ever interview Eminem, and he said that the greatest trait in all of these successful artists is that they're artists, but in addition to that, they're also really intelligent businessmen. So the whole entrepreneur factor is one that's super important, and obviously it's a trait that you carry. In your 3 careers, I know you obviously have tons of crazy stories, and I've heard some of them before, but do you just have one that really stands out that you could share?
Well, first of all, the entrepreneurial thing is really heavy, and I think calling myself Prince Charles Alexander is what we call nowadays branding. We didn't call it branding back in the day, but that branding has really helped me to survive. And even Tony's real name is not Maserati. It's really Maserati or something like that.
Oh, no shit. I didn't know that. How'd you get the name Prince, by the way?
Well, I was kind of running around with a bunch of roughnecks when I was a kid, but I went to really good schools. So it's like I had an education that was really princely. So when I started doing my first record, I had played around with names like Sweet Charles, Charming Charles, Brandy Alexander. And I said, the way that I was brought up really reminds me of a princely education. And I had just finished reading the book Prince and the Discourses by Niccolo Machiavelli.
Okay, I'm not familiar. I got to check it out.
I said, I'm going to go with Prince Charles. And you know what's going to happen to me? I swear to God, England, in London, they're going to discover my music. And they're going to make fun of their Prince Charles by playing my music. I'm a black guy in leather with chains, strippers on stage, and they're going to make really a lot of fun of him. And that's exactly what happened in my career. My music went over to London and kind of blew up. But I think one of my funniest stories, I got a few, but one of the funniest ones is Suicidal Thoughts by Notorious B.I.G. We were looking for a sound effect so that when he shot himself, he would thud, down to the floor. And we searched the Sound Ideas library of sound effects and couldn't find anything. So, I mean, it sounds pretty simple, but literally we asked Biggie to fall on the floor, and we didn't know if that would work. We didn't know if that would be a good piece of Foley, which is like how you replace things with sound effects.
Right.
So he actually didn't want to do it. He thought it was kind of a weird suggestion, but we convinced him to do it. It was me, Puffy, and an assistant engineer, and maybe one of Puffy's people hanging on. And it was amazing, man. As the tape was rolling and the rap comes to the end and we hear the bang of the gunshot, and then with the lights out, we really couldn't see anything. We hear boom, 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 boom. And it was so incredible. It sounded so good that we just looked at each other and we just cracked up laughing and just, going crazy. Because
he's a big dude too. So when he's falling, you're going to really hear it. It's not like if I were to fall in that live room.
Good. We didn't know what was going to happen. And I think that story is kind of the thing that you don't hear about the Notorious B.I.G., that he was a young man who was involved in creative endeavors. He was, he's portrayed, I think, as a young street person, drug dealer with some rapping skills. But conceptually, his 2 albums were really well-rounded pieces of work that had skits and raps and sampling interesting compositions. The guy that I interacted with was a recording artist. The guy that's written about and that films are about seems to be a troubled human being or a human being with a tough life or whatever. But the guy that I was working with was very much a recording artist, like any other recording artist that comes into the studio with hopes and dreams and wishes that this could be the thing that changes their life and sets them free.
And rest in peace too, because he passed way too young. I love that you're here just explaining all the truths behind these stories. That kind of brings me into the topic that I wanted to talk about, which is I guess just race in music and kind of in our culture as a whole, because it's becoming a lot more prevalent now. Like everybody has a cell phone or an iPhone, and they can film all these things that have been happening and just kind of swept under the rug for so long. And now we're so much more aware of it, which I think is really an amazing thing, although as telling as it can be. I think it's really important that we know these truths. So there's a few aspects, I guess, that I wanted to touch on. Before we do that, though, just a quick lighthearted question that you kind of remind me of. Speaking of sound effects off that record, in that track where he's having sex with that girl, what was that from? Was he actually in there fucking that girl in the studio?
Oh,
you know what I'm talking about?
We were just really good. Yeah, come on, you chicken eating greasy.
That's the one. Hell yeah.
That is my favorite interlude of all time.
Oh, it's the best one, greatest of all time, hands down.
I love that. I love it. But
how did you get that? You were just
we were just playing around. We had a saying, and that saying actually carried over from Uptown Records, because Puffy was an A&R person at Uptown. But the saying was, "Let me see the movie." So as we were creating records, we were trying to design not necessarily videos. It wasn't about let me make this so that it looks like an interesting video. It was let me make this to pique your imagination so that you can actually see the movie from the audio. And that was one of the ones I really liked.
That's incredible, and I think that's almost kind of a lost art too, with records getting shorter. Like Kanye's record was only 20 minutes long.
Yeah,
you're not getting movies anymore. You're getting like shows, which is it's fine. It moves with the time, and people's attention spans get shorter, so they have to kind of adapt. That's that whole business thing.
If you listen to The Chronic, if you listen to Snoop's debut album, if you listen to Eminem's debut album, you listen to Biggie's debut and Puffy's debut. Man, the interludes are what made those things really sing. It just, because it gave you an inside look, or at least what you thought was an inside look, it gave you more perspective other than just the composition. It gave you a little piece of the life. I guess people don't do that now because your life is on the internet. So they don't need to do
Not me, just for the record.
Find out everything you want from TMZ,
Yeah, alternative facts, as we call them, right? Exactly. There's a viral video. I don't know if you've seen it, but I know that you're a big Bruno Mars fan, and a big supporter of what he does. And there's this viral video of a girl talking about how he's a cultural appropriator, and she's saying shit like, "Yeah, if Bruno Mars died tomorrow, like I wouldn't even care. This guy isn't an artist. He's like a wedding singer who is he's like a Prince cover artist, not his own artist." What's kind of your take on that and the whole concept of cultural appropriation?
She's ridiculous. First of all, I don't know how Puerto Rican is not a person of color, and I think that he's a Filipino, so he's part Filipino, part Jewish, and part Puerto Rican.
That's right.
And when I was growing up in the 60s, Black people, white people, Asian people, brown people, we were all together as people of color. And I don't know how our memory has gotten so short that now we're so divisive that you can look at Bruno Mars and say that Bruno Mars is not a person of color. That's insane to me. But anyway, the young person who said what she said has to be given the podium also and is allowed to speak, blah, 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 blah. Meanwhile, somebody like me who's been around and seen soul music and funk music and disco music and hip hop music in about 3 or 4 or 5 different incarnations, I'm totally clear that Bruno Mars is a black artist. There's nothing about him that's not a black artist. And he is not Justin Timberlake, who's a Caucasian that wants to be a black artist. Bruno Mars is basically from the African diaspora. Even for me, if you're Puerto Rican, that's part of the African diaspora. And you know what? I'm going to tell you something. What really makes him part of the African diaspora to me is just that his skin is so brown.
Yeah.
Literally that alone puts him in a category in America that is just not Caucasian. You can't spin that away in America because America has been affected for centuries by the color of the skin. That conversation is the color of the skin. So this young African American woman, I appreciate her attempt at trying to enlighten people, but
But
in some cases, a little bit more understanding, knowledge, education is necessary. And it could be that our school systems are failing when young people start to say things like that.
Yeah.
We basically need to really, really get on the ball and on the case to help people gain a bit more clarity about what we are actually up against and what we're fighting for in this country in terms of the word equality and equanimity.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of one of the reasons why I wanted to do this episode too. Obviously you're a professor, so I knew that you would have some really real things to say about this topic. And it's it's kind of funny to me. It's like almost comical that you just debunked her entire like 20-minute speech in just one sentence by explaining that, Bruno Mars does have brown skin. And as an Asian American, I feel like I'm in kind of a unique spot because I don't have the privilege of, say, like a white person, but at the same time, I've been racially profiled, but I'm never gonna get shot for it. You know what I mean? Like I'll never get killed for it. And and there's even privilege to being Asian as well, like with like corporate America and tech companies and stuff like that, but they're less likely to become CEOs. So I think just being an Asian American makes me kind of almost like a fly on the wall in terms of this entire debate, which is kind of a privilege in itself and kind of a blessing. I was wondering what would be your take on that if Bruno Mars wasn't brown skinned? Like let's take Justin Timberlake for example. What's your take on him kind of doing that style of music?
Well, Justin Timberlake just showed his true colors, a man in the woods. I mean, what black person do you know walks around with paisley shirts on? I mean, So I think as much as I love Justin, and he's very well researched, at the end of the day, he can code switch in a way that a black person cannot code switch.
True.
And I think that in many ways, Bruno can't really code switch. If Bruno put on a hoodie and walked down the street, you would think that's a brother. Period. End of story. If Justin put on a hoodie and walked down the street, you would think it was a college student. And or I'm not saying you, I mean our culture. I'm afraid to have my young child, my 7-year-old brown-skinned child, out in the middle of a white neighborhood like a Wellesley or a Malden at 7 or 8 p.m. Like, say my brown child goes to my Caucasian friend's home or his Caucasian friend's home. And at the end of the night, 7, 8 p.m., the sun is down. My brown child's car is like 2 blocks away because when he got there were a lot of cars. Now, if my Caucasian friend or my brown-skinned child's Caucasian friend is not equally aware and equally vigilant of the issues that go on in this country, then they'll say goodbye to my child at the door and let him walk 2 blocks by himself. That is the type of ridiculous thing that can go on when people are not woke. When you are woke and you are Caucasian, you will walk my brown child to his car in your all Caucasian neighborhood. Because one of your neighbors might call and might get the police to come and roust my child, and one thing could lead to another, and then we lose another child. So this idea of being aware is not something that's relegated only for black people, brown people. It's also something that Asian people and Indian people and Caucasian people also need to be aware of, lest any of us could suffer the damage of being profiled.
Yeah. I'm so happy you just said it too. It's crazy. I was talking to someone else about this. Actually, I just had her on my podcast yesterday, but we were talking in the car because she's a female, and she went through a whole like sexual harassment thing with a producer that she was working with and someone who was in power and kind of above her, kind of took advantage of her. But to me, it's one thing to read about it or see about it on the internet, but to actually hear it from somebody that I know, or for the listeners, somebody who you listen to talking to somebody that they know, that makes it so much more real. So I think that it's really important to kind of voice it on platforms like this. I'm wondering though, because I'm not really satisfied with just everybody has to just walk them to their car. You know what I mean? Like, what's what do you think is the solution? Like, how do you get people woke, and how do you and there's no easy answer to this too. I know you're laughing, but
that's a great question, Wes, because I just came back from Kenya.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, what were you doing out there, by the way?
I was doing a couple of seminars, music seminars. I did seminars on Logic and Pro Tools and vocal production and hip hop.
Cool.
And in Kenya, first of all, it's like 98% black everywhere you go, right? And Boston is probably what, 90%, maybe 88% white.
I wouldn't know, to be honest, but I definitely believe that.
It's a huge white population. So everywhere you go in Boston, you see whiteness.
Mm-hmm.
Everywhere you go in Kenya, you see blackness. I've been to Africa before. This is my third time. But because of what's going on in this country currently, being in Africa really helped me to see, and I know this is going to sound shocking when I say it, America's a white country. Period. End of story. And it doesn't want to be anything other than a white country. I'm almost at the point, actually, I probably am at the point, but I will still give it my best effort. I'm at the point where I really don't care anymore about convincing anyone in America that there needs to be equality. I don't even see how it works, because the Democrats want this to be a white country. The Republicans want this to be a white country. White people want it to be a white country. And nobody has the power. Oh, no, nobody's concerned enough about equality and equanimity to actually do the things that it would take in order for that to happen. So I know that this is probably maybe one of the first times I'm actually stating this viewpoint, because I just recently came back from Kenya, but it has made me more comfortable with the fact that America is what it is. And that if I want to go somewhere where I want to be surrounded by blackness, it exists in many places around the world. And that the American existence is not the only existence for me. And that gave me a different kind of resolve. I guess, and I would have to ask you, as an Asian American, you know that there's some place on the world where there are lots of people that look like you. And I don't know what that feels like. Because as an African American, we don't know where we come from. We don't know whether we come from Kenya or Mali or Liberia or whatever. But you know what? I'm almost to the point now, especially with what's going on in America, where I'm just going to adopt Kenya.
I totally respect that opinion. I would like to challenge it though. Just I guess to address the last thing you said. I actually saw a video kind of recently. It took place in China, and I come from my parents are from China. They're immigrants, and they moved here when they were young. And this person who was doing the video went around interviewing different people in China, Chinese people, and asked them, hey, like, do you think that white people are more attractive than you guys? Do you think white people are smarter than you guys? And all these insane questions, and the answers I was hearing, I was like fucking shocked, dude. Because they were all like, yeah, like there's no denying that white people have better bone structure, and they do really well in these corporate jobs, and they assimilate really well. And I have friends from Berkeley who are from China, and some of them are skateboarders, and they say when the cops come and they see white people skating, you know, they're fucking taking pictures and shit like they're celebrities. But if my Asian friend is skating, he'll get kicked out immediately. So I don't know if I really agree with that. For me, at least, obviously it's going to be case by case. But I just thought that was really profound and really.
I'm not saying that the world isn't screwed up. I'm totally clear, because even in Kenya, if you go all the way up to and bump into the money, I'm sure the money starts to get less and less black and less brown. It probably gets whiter and whiter as you really go all the way up. But to walk down the street and see black people and the level of concern they have as average human beings, and how different it is from when you walk down the street and see the level of concern that people have for each other in America, it just feels like there is another way that this capitalistic existence can occur. And I totally get what you're saying, because there are books like, how Europe underdeveloped Africa. And all my life I've been like, yeah, well, Africa screwed up too. And it is. And you have totalitarian dictatorships in Africa also, because the leaders in Africa were polluted by, colonialism and capitalism. But as a person who never had a connection to anything other than America, so you've always had a connection to China, whether you wanted it or not. It's just always been there,
right?
And sometimes when you have something, it's easy to say, "Oh, let's just poo-poo that." And so I get that, and I'm not disputing you at all. All I'm saying is, for African Americans, we don't have that. It's America or nothing.
Interesting.
And that's how we live in America, and that's how we survive in America. And I personally have probably reached a point where I literally would say to many people, I just don't care. But the truth is, of course I do.
Right. You were talking about your own son, right? So obviously it's important.
I do care, but I'm kind of convinced that I primarily speak to the choir, and the choir hears me. And even the person that I could sway, the Caucasian that I could sway and say that Caucasian is now a better person and has more concepts of equality, even that person was already swayable. The people I want to change are the ones who seem intractable, who could not be swayed. And that, I don't think that's going to happen in my lifetime.
I'm definitely not saying that there's an easy answer at all, and maybe there is even no solution. And I totally feel for you thinking that the energy it would take to exert in order to get to that point is beyond you wanting to care to do it. So I definitely don't blame you either.
And then the caveat to that, Wes, is I've been doing it all my life. So it's not like I'm giving up because I never tried. No, I've been trying, Jesus, since I was 13 years old.
Hey, if anybody says that you haven't been trying who listens to this show, they're fucking obviously wrong. But what I was kind of gonna say is just kind of going back to the thing I said about the Chinese people who are interviewed. I feel like a lot of it for them was kind of a confidence issue. So if there were more, Asians in the media and more Asians being portrayed positively, they wouldn't have these negative opinions about like their body image and their level of attractiveness and stuff like that. And I would even go as far as to say that people like Childish Gambino and Joyner Lucas are raising awareness. I mean, obviously, I don't think every white person is racist by any means. I have plenty of white people who I know who are all for it and agree with us. But you're right; they were swayable before they reached that conclusion, or maybe they grew up with that conclusion. And you're right. But I think that the way, just me personally, just because I have kind of a no quit attitude, I guess, I'm not really satisfied with just giving up, and there's no way I can really say that because it doesn't affect me as much as it does you, obviously. But in my opinion, which is totally not an expert opinion for that reason.
Well, see, when I was 7 years old, we had the Civil Rights and the Voting Rights Act, and the world looked like it was going to change, and we had a lot of hope. And then Martin Luther King is assassinated, and Robert F. Kennedy is assassinated because John F. Kennedy had been assassinated in '63. So we're talking about 1965, and then the assassinations happened in 1968, and then you go into the '70s. With Nixon, and it's kind of looking like the country's weird, and we got the Vietnam War, and then the Vietnam War ends, and then you get the peanut farmer. I'm spacing out right now, but we get a Democrat president. The frick is his name? Carter. I'm sorry, Jimmy Carter. And Jimmy Carter's looking like a breath of fresh air. A very intelligent man. Man, the Republicans made him look like he was an idiot. I mean, the portrayal of Jimmy Carter is like he was stupid, ineffectual, couldn't make decisions, blah, 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 when really he was very well thought out. And then came Ronald Reagan, 1980. He lobbies to be president. He becomes president in 1981. He was president for 8 years, and then he was followed by George H.W. Bush for 12 years of Republican rule. Oh, my God. So the hope that we had actually starts becoming dashed around the age of Reagan, and for 12 years. So basically the 70s, you know, free liberation, free sex, all that kind of stuff. It was like, oh man, the world is getting ready to open up. And then all of a sudden Reagan starts to close things down. And then we have, after Reagan, we have our boy there, Clinton, and Clinton comes in and he's Democratic and all his friends are black. And, you know, we joke about him being the first black president and all this kind of
Jesus.
stuff. Cool. And a lot of people don't realize how bad the crack epidemic was. And so he clamped down on crack, and in clamping down on crack, you know, he enacted laws that black people suffered from more than white people. And
that's a really fucked up.
Nobody really saw that coming. So the way he gets blamed is actually really inaccurate, because I was there and I saw how crack was killing the neighborhood, and we were trying to figure out anything, and this law looked like a breath of fresh air. But anyway, yeah, it really did. I mean, the way that it's spun now is actually out of context. So then we get George W. Bush, and George W. Bush looked like Satan when he came in, and now he looks like a puppy dog compared to the nut we have in office now.
Yeah,
but
no kidding.
For 8 years, and we had Obama for 8 years. Obama looked like the second coming of Jesus Christ to black people. And now you look at black liberal thought, and it looks at Obama as an ineffectual president that really didn't stand up for black people. And so what I'm saying to you is, I've had hope since 1965 that the way this country looks was going to start skewing itself to a better place, when all that really happened is we put lipstick on a pig. It's still a pig.
Wow.
There's something really gross about this place. It was gross when I was a kid, and it's still gross. So should we stop doing what we're doing? No. Should we continue to fight back and enact laws and change things? Yes, 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 yes. But the reality is we would need Congress to weigh in. We would need the Senate to weigh in. And the way that all of our states are gerrymandered. That's
super fucked up. Yeah.
Yeah. The way our states are gerrymandered, and the Electoral College is putting us behind the eight ball. And who gerrymandered us and who created the Electoral College? That has to do with people that want to keep the status quo, to conserve. Okay, so if you want to conserve anything about this American system, and this American system was flawed from the beginning because it didn't include women in the Constitution, it didn't include black people in the Constitution, then what the hell are you trying to conserve? You're trying to conserve an institution that is not equal. And if you're a Democrat and you want to conserve the Constitution, and if you're a Republican and you want to conserve the Constitution, and if you're a Libertarian and you want to conserve the Constitution, then you know what? You can kiss my black, you know.
God damn.
None of you care. None of you care about me and my child. And that's how I feel right now. Period. Bottom line. End of story.
Yeah, that's really powerful stuff, man. That's it's really fucked up, dude. I'm not disagreeing at all.
We're getting the real, Wes.
That's what I wanted. But it kind of reminds me actually of what you said earlier, kind of just in the beginning, about how like Biggie was portrayed as this fucking like person with problems or whatever, but in actuality, he was really just a recording artist and a Renaissance man, and really just a genius of his time. So just to kind of play devil's advocate, I would actually argue that I think with the quality of media kind of improving and artists coming forward who are black and not being portrayed that way, and people who are fighting and making a difference every single day, it's small steps. Things have to get worse before they get better. It's kind of like a virus, right? Like you have to become aware of all the things, and then you fight it, and then it gets worse because there's people who rebel against that. But then eventually, hopefully, it comes to terms. And I'm I'm not a fucking psychic or anything, so I'm in no way trying to say that this is what's going to happen. But I guess for you, PC, I would hope that you just maybe wait a little bit longer, man.
Well, from my point of view, the space that you live in is the space I lived in when I was 13, and we had the blaxploitation period where you started seeing all these black people on film, like the Shaft movie and the Mac movie, and Three the Hard Way, and it was like, oh man, things are getting ready to change, and blah 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 blah. And you know who destroyed the blaxploitation era of black cinema was black intellectuals. Black intellectuals said, well, the white people are making all the money on this, so it must not be a good thing. And so there are these paradoxes about the pathos of how the American system is set up, where the successful black person is now seen as other to the other. In other words, if the hordes of black people are seen as other, and then one of them pops up and starts to have success, now that black person is seen as an other, like, oh, he's no longer black, and things like that. So you probably haven't seen, but I have, the pushback against Childish Gambino, the pushback against Bruno, the pushback against Beyonce, the pushback against Jay-Z, on and on and on and on. The pushback against Barack Obama. How can you be black in America and push back against Barack Obama? But black intellectuals do find a way to do it. And,
interesting.
This
I ask kind of
creates a paradox. Yeah,
right. I asked kind of a really broad question, I guess, like what's the solution, right? So that's something that's really broad. But I guess a better question would have been, what is the next step? Like the way you solve a big problem, right, is you take it and you turn it into smaller problems, in my opinion, is the best way to tackle like a large issue, especially something like that. So would you say that the next step would be to have people kind of unite? Because that's what the whole Joyner Lucas video was about too, is it was about unity and not being separate, instead of saying black people, white people, just say people. You know what I mean? Would you say that would be? That's
why I tried to give you some historical context, because if we're in a 100-year war, then we're halfway through, because from 1965 to where are we now? 2018. So if we're in a 100-year war, we're halfway through. If we're in a 500-year war, then we're only a tenth of the way through. And I honestly don't know whether we're in a 100-year war or a 500-year war, because of the time that I've been on the earth. I thought that we would be so much further than we are now. So where we are is we are in stasis. We're taking 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 3 steps forward, 4 steps back. We're kind of in stasis, and all we can do is stay the course. So, but here's the funny thing: as I educate you, as I educate a Caucasian person, as we move forward in 10 or 15 years, another child of racist inclination or who's born into a family of racist ideology is also being educated. And this is what you start to see when you're my age. Right. That as I can, and I have educated white people in my time. I've educated Caucasians in my time,
of course,
and brought them into a higher level of understanding and a higher level of consciousness. But right behind them was another one that needed to be educated, that rejected and rebuked it. So there are people that say recently it was like, well, all the racists need to die off. I think people that said that all the racists need to die off and then things will get better. And how long does that take to happen?
Well, there's cases like the Westboro Baptist Church where it's really sad and really unfortunate. I'm sure you're familiar with them, but one of the daughters of the founders of the Westboro Baptist Church was getting on the internet, and she started questioning her beliefs and her ideals, which, bless her soul, must have been so difficult to do. And she actually estranged herself from her family because she realized that everything that they were doing and standing for, and all these events that she was going to and picketing and rioting were wrong. It wasn't morally correct to be doing that, and she kind of came to that conclusion on her own. So,
and her choice was what?
I don't know the details, but I know that she left and she's been portrayed on the media, and she talks about how she did that and how she came to the realization and everything. But I'm like, if she can do it, anybody, not anybody, obviously, but it could happen more frequently, hopefully.
Yeah, and I mean, you're going to hear stories of optimism, and then that's fine and that's good. People will change. People will become more enlightened. People will be able to see the light. But all I can say is this is a white country. It was founded this way. Its constitution was designed this way. It will work very hard to protect this. America was responsible for flipping South Africa from its apartheid state. And even now, the ANC is being called into question by the new generation of Black Africans. So that's another thing about being my age. I've seen institutions brought to their knees. And that's interesting.
That's serious.
Really, really interesting, because on one hand, it's good because maybe America could be brought to its knees. But on the other hand, if civil rights is an institution, it's possible that civil rights could be brought to its knees by a huge right-wing sweep. And that's the fear that a lot of people who are into more progressive ideals see as the potential of happening right now. And the pushback, the best pushback would be legal pushback. Congress, the Senate, the presidency, local state government, local city councils. That would be the pushback. But Wes, every election in America seems to be dominated by Republicans. So when is this pushback, this blue wave, this we want justice and equality in America supposed to happen if our political system is dominated by right-wing ideology? I just don't get it.
It is right now, and it is unfortunate. I mean, as you know, Obama was a huge step in the right direction. We could literally talk about this.
They hated him, and they treated that intelligent human being like he was a shoeshine boy.
Some people did. Obviously incredibly unfortunate. But personally, I think it's important to kind of take note of the positive aspects of it too, because it wasn't everybody. You're right. The negative pushback shouldn't have happened at all. But unfortunately, that's just where we're at right now. So
why are people devoting Republican? I don't even know how to even phrase it any other way. Why are people voting Republican when the Democrats seem to offer this equality concept? And then why are people running away from this concept of equality? And who is it that's running away from equality? You know,
I think it's. Do you know who Eddie Wong is by any chance?
No.
He's he has a show, and he's the writer of what's it called, Fresh Off the Boat. You ever heard of that show?
Oh yeah. I love that show. Yeah.
Okay, I've never actually seen it, embarrassingly, but he's the creator of it, and ironically, he was obsessed with like Biggie and everything. He's based out of New York, but I saw an interview he did recently. And bless this guy's soul too, because he goes into these interviews with these fucking like white nationalists and is there maintaining his composure and keeping his cool and not getting angry or raising his voice or anything. Which
that wouldn't be me. I'd
hey, power to you. But I really honestly don't think that it's really just lack of awareness. Because if you watch the interview, that this guy really thinks that he's in the right, and he believes that that things were equal prior to now. So he feels as if he's losing his war on equality, which is not correct. I'm not justifying it in any way, but I'm getting inside their brain. So that's why I keep pushing this whole idea of using like music and the media to spread awareness.
Oh, I get it. I mean, what the problem is well articulated. I could articulate what the problem is, and if anyone that doesn't want to listen to me, you can look up the work of Dr. Joy DeGruy, Degruy. She has written about something called post-traumatic slave disorder, and it basically says, okay, first of all, I'll paraphrase it. Who created racism? It wasn't black people that created racism. It was white people that created racism.
Right.
So who's supposed to solve racism? It can't be black people alone.
Oh, interesting.
White people have to also participate, because if the people that it's like an abusive husband and a wife. So you go to the wife and say, okay, wife, solve the fact that you're being abused at home. It ain't going to happen like that. The husband has to say, I will stop this abuse. I will go to therapy. I will retrain myself. So if you can't get the whole white nation retrained, the white nation won't even believe that it's abusive. Then we are kind of in a household where basically our mom is getting dogged out by our dad. And there's nothing to do about it. Period. Until dad looks at himself and says, I am an asshole. And I need help.
Damn. That's an analogy I've never heard before. And yeah, you're totally right.
Think about it. Dr. Joy DeGruy, PTSD, post-traumatic slave disorder. I mean, once I heard her work, I was like, Jesus, this is brilliant.
Yeah. I'd recommend anybody listening to this show right now to go check that out. Even beyond that, it's crazy. I mentioned this girl that I interviewed yesterday. She's a friend of mine. I went to Berkeley with her, and she unfortunately got diagnosed with cancer. So she has stage 4 lung cancer right now. Jesus. And we got into a really interesting conversation. This was before the podcast, so the listeners won't even know this. But we were talking about cells, because she's been doing a lot of research on it, obviously. And she said that something really interesting. She said that cells have memories. Because this is a girl who she wasn't an avid smoker or anything, so the fact that she got it at this age, she's my age, I'm 24, was like, holy shit, like how did that happen? And she said that cells have memories, and they're passed down from generation to generation. Like you come out of like the sperm or whatever, and life is cells, so you're made up of these cells, and they have memories from past generations. And if they're stressed cells, then it could potentially, the theory is that it could potentially cause a mutation, which is what cancer is, essentially, is a mutation of the cells. So you saying that just really made me think about just her saying that.
The funny thing is, Wes, is that it's taking you time to discover things that somebody like me has actually known for decades, and even this whole concept of the passing on in the DNA. And what I was trying to say before, as the moments move forward in time and we increase our ability to inform a generation of people, the generation behind them is lagging and needs to be caught up. And it's this ever spinning wheel of how can you get to every generation simultaneously, and that hasn't happened despite the internet. You know, it's funny. As much information as there is on the internet, do you see how many people in your generation still go around saying, I don't know, I'm not aware of, I'm not sure of?
I was gonna say that before we started talking, I thought it was totally fine to just kind of take a back seat. Like if you're not part of the problem, you're not part of the problem. But if you're just kind of neutral, like whatever, I don't care. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, do you? But you're definitely making me kind of rethink that a lot.
Oh yeah, it's huge. Well,
what I was gonna say is that I know I have like one Facebook friend who he has like a Confederate flag and shit, and he posts all these absurd Facebook statuses, and he's my age. But what I was gonna say that is kind of interesting is that anytime he posts something, everyone's just shitting on him on the internet. So that's kind of the interesting thing about that. But the, I guess, kind of downside about the internet is the fact that now he, being in he's from Needham, which is just a suburban town outside of Boston.
I know Needham, yeah.
This dude's from Needham, Him having that opinion in Needham is like absurd. But now, because of the internet, he can find somebody from like the Needham of fucking another state, and then they have that in common, and they have the internet that they can talk to each other. So that's, I guess, the downside to that.
My son is a little bit older than you, and he turned me on to Reddit.
Okay.
And basically, the right wing extreme point of view doesn't really play itself out, at least not on my Facebook feed. But if I really want to see it, I can go to Reddit and just type in, I hate black people, and your life will be forever changed.
Jesus, interesting.
Once you see the voluminous amount of hate that exists, it's stunning.
That's fucked up. I've never even thought to look that up on Reddit before.
Yeah, and you wouldn't, and you shouldn't. But the fact
it's good to be aware.
The fact that I want to, I'm like a coach of a football team. I can't send my team into battle without doing some analysis of the opposing team. So I need to know the playbook.
Yeah,
I need to know what's going on the other side.
I think you did a great job of informing the listeners a little bit about this playbook, quote unquote playbook, as well. This is about our time. We actually went way over, but it's really good. I'm glad we did.
No, feel free to edit what you need to edit.
No, I'm gonna leave it. I want it to just be as is. I would love for you to share just something people can do. Like, can we leave the listeners with just a piece of action that they could take, even if as trivial as it is?
Well, most people that are listening to this that probably support your point of view and or my point of view would seek to stand up for injustice, seek to stand up for a person that is being chastised, a young lady that's being chastised, because equality is not just about blackness. Equality is about equality, period, across the board.
Right.
So speak up for your colleague that's not getting that promotion. Speak up for the young woman that's getting ridiculed by the male in the office. Do those things. Be proactive. Continue in that fashion. Live your life as somebody that actually does seek equality. And that might shorten the 500-year war down to a 100-year war, and that would be a great thing.
Well, I'll take that, and then maybe that could get shortened even farther if enough people do that. Exactly. Really, really quick. We're like way past time, but I'm loving this recording. Do you think that there is a right way and a wrong way to approach a situation like that? Just because I've found, just in any argument, it doesn't matter what it is, the best way that I have success with at least like changing somebody's mind about just a debate, regardless of what it is to kind of think about it from their perspective and understand that from the first conversation, they probably won't change their mind. It comes from just an ecosystem of thoughts, and you plant the seed essentially, and you do it in a way where unfortunately you have to be the bigger person, right? Because they're going to get really passionate and aggressive about it. And you can't do that, in my opinion. So you plant the seed, and then maybe 2 weeks later, they may even not admit it to you, but they'll be with their friend and they'll be talking about it. And suddenly he'll find himself quoting you, is what I've found is the best way to approach something like that.
Well, yeah. The truth is, are we trying to win a revolution, or are we trying to win a debate? And winning a debate is about language and coercing, and there's probably a good chance that you would need a mediator to tell you whether you won the debate or not. Winning a revolution is about knowing where your armed forces are at any particular point in time, and what they're able to do and what they're able to marshal. Now, can we as human beings create a force and marshal a force that could defeat the American armed forces? Probably not. And that's where we are stuck here in terms of an armed revolution.
This may be like the pacifist part of me coming out, but I'm actually on the side that I take a more Zen approach, I guess. I'm not totally convinced that full-on revolution is the best way to achieve revolution results.
It wouldn't win, but it worked in 1917. It worked in 1789. It worked in 1776. So the American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, that's how change occurred. Could that happen now? Probably not. But these days, even to win a debate, you might still need to know. You know that dude that you know in your neighborhood who, I don't know, he was a troublemaker and he went to jail and he got out of jail and he would like lay down his life for you. I mean, I grew up in the hood. I know people like that. Puffy knows people like that. Like, you ask me, is there a right way? I actually think that winning this conversation is a 360-degree approach. So there's a diplomatic face, and there's an aggressive face, there's a pacifist face, and there's just a shout and yell and scream in your face. Mm-hmm. So, and they are all relevant because Malcolm X made Caucasians so fearful that they wanted to talk to Dr. King. Without Malcolm X, Dr. King was not going to be spoken to because he was no threat.
Right.
But
interesting.
Malcolm X was a threat. That's why the conversations with Dr. King moved to the forefront.
That's very interesting. I never thought about it like that. And
that's Black thought knows that. But we, in many ways, the media has vilified the fruit of Islam. They vilified Minister Farrakhan. They vilified the Muslims and said that they're a hate group and they're not talking about equality and they hate the Jews and all this kind of stuff. And once again, that leads into what I was saying before about when we do have Black people that move to the forefront or elevate themselves, they are vilified to Black people. And uniting is very, very tricky when you have this extremely well-vetted propaganda machine called the United States government and the United States media. As much as I love MSNBC and CNN, they're complicit also. And it would take me too long because we're done, but they're equally complicit. I mean, how many times did you hear Trump's name on CNN before Trump got elected? You heard his name hundreds of times every day. Yeah. They are equally complicit in all of this. And there's nobody at that station that's not a millionaire. All of those journalists are millionaires. Or at least way, way, way up into the hundreds of thousands, much more than anyone else. So what do they have to gain by seeking equality for us? They are complicit. And I know this sounds like conspiracy theory stuff.
No, they got their millions somehow.
I'm not really trying to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I'll go back to when I went to Kenya. This thing looks pretty silly from another point of view. When you're in a country that is all Black, and that, of course, is dealing with its own colonial past, but still, if I look into the eyes of that human being across from me, I see a human being. That's not what I see in America. When I look at the eyes of somebody across me in America, I have to take time to know whether I'm looking at a human being. I have to measure that person's actions before I realize whether I'm looking at a human being or whether I'm looking at somebody that's complicit.
Damn.
And anyone that's complicit for me right now, like I told you, they can kiss my black, you know what.
All right, well, I think that's a perfect note to end it on. PC, seriously, man, I can't thank you enough for coming here and sharing just everything from your life experiences, and you gave me and a lot of our listeners a lot of food for thought, for sure.
Well, I'm glad you wanted to step out on that limb, and anytime, man, feel free, and this does not come from a place of hate. This comes from a place of extreme concern for all of us.
Of course.
And concern for women, concern for people of color, concern for the ideals and the ideas behind what equality can and should be. And hopefully we'll get there.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of The Music Journal. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you got a lot out of it. If you want to know more about me and what I do, I just put out a personal EP on Spotify. You can go to bit.ly/Wes Yee Spotify. And if you want to know more about music production, I teach an online course about it too. Just shoot an email to wes@homestudiohits.com and I'll send you an application. Just for filling out the application, I'll send you a free sample pack of sounds I use to make the instrumental you're listening to and more. All these links will be available in the show notes, so you can check them out there. And while you're there, if you feel inclined to rate this show 5 stars, that would really help me out. Other than that, make sure you subscribe so you don't miss an episode. Thanks again. Peace.